And then we have, do you have comments or thoughts to share? And then we would get open text responses. Some of them we would have 300 or 400 open text responses.
Do you have an ability to follow up with any of the people that took the survey? For example, for those that were very unsupportive, I'm curious to know if they understood the situation as well as the rest of the people in spectrum, or maybe they understood it more. I'm just curious if that consistency between knowledge.
So this is how far within the scope of our engagement where we were able to get down to the weeds, and the answer is I did not.
Okay.
We did not follow up. In many cases we have raw data that we can share, and if people wanted to in the community drill down that level, they could.
Now, the way this question is phrased, potential restructuring mean anything, so you don't give them a hint of what you are thinking.
You're right.
We're so proud, sorry.
So now, here's our first question for you tonight. This is really we want to test our software before we get into a little bit further into the presentation. So we want to know, those of you in the audience, how safe do you feel in the community where you live?
Maybe there was some late comments that kind of came in and got down.
Sure.
So we go through this one more time. We can just go through that.
Sure. So if you don't want to pull out your device and log in, you could just come up to one of these 4 or 5 computers we have and sit down. Otherwise, you could text. The number that you're texting to is 22333. So open a message and send it to the number 22333. And the message that you're sending is Tanya Zwallen 250. And then hit send.
And that's how you get hooked in.
That's how you got hooked in.
So I logged into the poll, the URL, and I still have the question, did I bring my cell phone?
Yep.
So how do I get it to change to this new question?
It should automatically change to this question. These are all working.
Well, mine's a brick, but if we want to carry around.
Yeah, I can bring a computer to you too if you want. Would anyone like a computer?
If you're having troubles logging in and you want to respond, we have 2 pretty small, light, portable computers that have good batteries. We have a third with a little bit less powerful battery. Then we have my paperweight.
I also have a cell phone.
Okay. So in a very small sample size here, and of course, as we set these presentations up, we don't know how big an audience we're going to get. But we see that in general, people are feeling safe in their community, either safe or very safe.
So it's not so representative necessarily.
No, it's representative of the people who are here tonight.
Those of us who are here.
Very interesting.
Yep. So the other thing that we're kind of interested in is who's the primary law enforcement agency in your community where you live? We want to know where people are coming from tonight.
We don't have any.
So you text the letter ABC Deary.
You're right, we did not include Trumansburg. They were not part of our audience. Tanya, we've got to fix that for Wednesday and Thursday night. We need to give Trumansburg as an option on this slide.
Okay.
So if you are from Trumansburg, give us either skip this question or give us a sheriff's office response, I guess.
How much would that cost this to do this survey by mail? I wonder.
The questions we're asking tonight are really to help spark discussion in this room this evening.
No, I mean the whole survey that you did on Facebook and online.
That whole survey, I'm not a professional pollster. Tanya, you've done some more experience with community surveys.
What's the question?
How much would it have costed to do a representative survey out of a community of 100,000?
By mail, I mean mailing everybody.
By mail. I would need to take out a spreadsheet and do math on that.
But
More than the budget that I had to
yeah,
support you on.
easily 5 figures, if not well in, well.
From the county, we received dozens and dozens of paper copies.
Which were included.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the last question, kind of to tee things up for our discussion, and this is a free text response, is in general, what changes to policing do you feel are necessary? More staff, quicker response, better trained officers, nothing, it's perfect. And as we get them, this is gonna show up as individual responses, and then what will happen?
Words will come up.
Words will come up, okay.
Now, you're doing this for us. Do you do this question for the general public?
We had a similar question in that survey. Again, I don't tell you what it was while you guys are typing.
Nice emoji. Yes.
Yes, please.
The poll is set up so that you can respond as many times as you want,
Oh my goodness. I'm gonna regret that.
while the question is open.
So your question about how we asked this in the community, this was one of our open-ended questions of what changes would you like to see, what would you want to make sure remain the same in law enforcement? So that was one of our open-ended questions, and I'm paraphrasing that.
You didn't make the responses.
I do have them, but I didn't, I could have spent the whole hour and a half going through the baseline report, and I still would have left some of your questions unanswered. But tonight's goal is to be able to talk about some of the options we've thought about for the community. These are all excellent responses. And the other thing that we do is we get captured. LVAD is the law enforcement assisted diversion training. Somebody typed that in. I'm assuming that's the diversion training towards the opioid issue. Okay, I just want to make sure I know what that abbreviation stands for in this context. And just so you're aware, all these responses get captured by this program as well as the ones for the next 2 sessions we're doing, and they will be combined and included in a final report that will be shared with the elected bodies and again with the community at the end. So we appreciate all this.
Should we stay on this for another minute?
One thing I'm sorry, I may have missed it, but what type of company is the company doing?
So the Center for Governmental Research is a private, nonprofit public policy firm. We've been around since 1915. We've been working with communities and nonprofit organizations for our whole 102+ year history, trying to solve different challenging community problems. in scale from something like this to helping reorganize or do a strategic planning for a small department. We most recently in your community helped do an analysis of criminal justice and what might need to happen with the Tompkins County Jail. So we were involved in that project as well. We've been slowing down a little bit on the responses?
No.
No, okay, then I'm going to leave this open for another minute. So what's going to happen next, we're transitioning and we're going to talk about some of the changes, some of the options that we feel may exist for the community. And I want to be clear that nothing that gets presented tonight is going as presented tonight to the legislature of any organization. It is here as an idea, and if there is traction, if there's support for it, there's going to be more implementation planning, there's going to be more community discussion. But this is kind of the result of our analysis, looking at some best practices, looking at what some other communities are doing, and seeing what might work here. I kind of had my timing mapped out, so I want to go with it. I think we're...
What does RoboCop mean?
Oh yeah.
Maybe that person could.
Something against us in trouble.
All right. Maybe someone afterwards can let me know what you meant by RoboCop. I'm not sure we're ready to, the robots are quite ready for that role yet. So I am going to start moving forward. I think this, if people type something in, will it still collect it? Probably, I don't think so.
Not once this is,
all right.
we've moved off this question.
Okay. We're going to move off. So these are our range of options. And they're bounded at the top and at the bottom of the status quo, which is really that if you think about the police department as a ship, this is the holding that steady course, no dramatic change. And then the last one, creating a single police agency, is the most dramatic. In between, we talk about expanding shared services and collaboration, and contracting for services, so one municipality contracting with another for service. The county agencies outside the city merging into one, and then the last one, which is creating a single police agency. And there's two different flavors of that. There is a county police department or an expanded county sheriff's office. And I'll get into each one of these in a little bit more detail. And there'll be several points as we go through this where we'll be asking for your thoughts and input based on the information we're giving you tonight. So the status quo, what do you have in your community right now? You've got separate organizations, and I want to emphasize with very good collaboration. I've worked in some communities where the police chiefs of neighboring towns don't talk to each other. It just doesn't happen. This community, it's very different. People work together, and they have for several decades. You've had a very functional mutual aid system where people share responses. If they need a unit that's closer, they do that. You have a SWAT team that's shared between the city and the county. You have a 911 center that is shared with all of the agencies in the community. You have a single records management system. All of these things, I'm trying to think, the list is, there's a full list of all the different places where the agencies interact. Plus there's the cooperation when there's a big incident. If there's a crime that's committed that needs a lot of resources to help solve it, people get together. The investigators know each other on a regular basis. They work together. They don't, not necessarily day to day, but when you have a large incident, people come together and you pool your resources for the betterment of the community. I have to tell you that doesn't happen everywhere. We don't want to take that for granted. You're doing some good things. But the other thing we talked about with the status quo is there's minimal change to operations. Now, the organizations have been evolving over time. They've been adopting technology. They've been bringing things together. They've been communicating a little bit more. That continues to happen and would continue to happen going forward. cost of personnel services in the community for all of your police officers is about $18 million a year. That's for roughly 125 people.
Does that count the state police?
That $18 million does not count the state police because they were not able to break down to the Tompkins County level what their expenses were. He could have given me 4 counties worth, but it wouldn't have worked. They are also the most highly paid law enforcement professionals in the community. One of the things to be aware of is the Ithaca Police Department has the potential to have the highest FTE full-time employee or full-time equivalent costs with a new contract and retroactive raise. They have been working under an expired contract since 2011. So there's a little bit of an opportunity where there could be a retroactive raise at some point. And yes?
Maybe you're going to get to this, but one thing that I haven't heard you talk about before we get into the different ways that things can be arranged is what we have adequate to the demand that exists, or is there a need for more different, whatever?
So that's really my last bullet here, which is varying levels of service based on your community. So as I mentioned, Village of Groton, they have made a decision that they only need their own officer on the road about 16 hours a day. The Village of Dryden was a 24-hour police department for many years. Then about 3 or 4 years ago, they made a decision to go down to being roughly 20 hours a day. And then the start of this year, they decided, you know what, we're not happy with what's going on in our community. We want to go back up to being a 24-hour police department, and they're in the process of implementing that. I think they may be at it now. I'm not sure, but they were midway through that. Yes?
When you spoke at Groton, was it that they didn't feel it was necessary given a cost-benefit analysis and it was costing too much, they moved to 16, or it was simply because they felt that it was so safe that they only needed 16 hours a day?
I did not ask that question in those terms. They've been at 16 for a number of years, like decades.
Because cost and effectiveness are definitely.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't feel like your answer addressed my.
Well, let me continue then a little bit,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
So then we get to Cayuga Heights. So the Cayuga Heights Police Department prides itself on providing a very high level of service. To the point where they do all sorts of property checks. They have access to businesses. They're doing all sorts of business checks. It's really a high level of service. When you look at the number of 911 calls in the community, and then you compare that to the actual officer activities, it's a very high ratio where the officers are going out and doing all sorts of directed patrols and providing all sorts of support for the community, doing a lot of traffic enforcement. That's the level of service that they've been directed to provide and they are providing, and that's what that community is choosing to provide. So that's what they believe they need to be safe in their community. That's what they want. They made that choice. And going back to Dryden, they made a choice that they weren't happy with having that gap of services in the middle of the night. So they made a community choice that we're going to go back up to being a 24-hour police department because that's what we think we need to feel safe. When you look at their call volume for 911 calls, when you look at their crime rate, it's higher or comparable to City of Ithaca. They feel that they have that need there. City of Ithaca is doing some different things. They've been trying to get back into a more community, I believe they call it the CAT, Community Action Team. They've been trying to bring their level of service back up after having some cuts in recent years. I think there's a little bit of acknowledgement there that they are improving but still have a place to go. So some step to go, and based on my interviews with that department. Tompkins County Sheriff's Office has had a level staffing for a number of years. And when we look at response times in the community, it is slowest in the rural areas of this county. So when you look at, you try and make that measurement, is that adequate? Somebody's banging on my door at 3 in the morning, I want them there in 2 minutes. And if I'm living out 15, 20 miles from a population center, it might take a long time for help to get there. And at that moment, I don't feel that my service is adequate. But that is how the service is structured. So we have different levels of service in the community. And the hope is that people are informed that they're choosing, they're getting that level of service in their community that they live or the community that they work, and they understand where it's coming from and what that level is. It is not equal. We have variations in response time. We have variations in the number of resources that would show up in a short period of time. The city of Ithaca is able to, they have the most number of officers on patrol. So if they have an issue, they can throw their resources at it more quickly from their own agency. But likewise, if there's an issue in Cuba Heights and they need to put that, we need help, that mutual aid in the plan, they're going to draw resources from the city of Ithaca as well as Sheriff's Office and Dryden. Is that answering your question?
It's getting a little closer, yeah. I guess I wonder who assesses the adequacy and how is it conveyed?
It's really driven by elected leaders in the community are deciding whether or not they're providing an adequate source. It comes into cost-benefit analysis. Is it, I've yet to meet a police chief who thinks he has enough officers or she thinks has enough officers. They always want to have 2 or 3 more, and they can tell me what they would do with them. And they can tell me how it would improve their services. And that's a great thing. But they may understand that the tax base can only handle so much. We talk about a little bit later on, some of these communities, the cost for the police department is 30 and 40% of the municipal budget. So if you want to add another officer to that, we're going up another 5 or 10% of that municipal budget. That's expensive. Yes?
Yeah, I think response time is an important data point. That's actually a non-subjective piece of information. But I'm going to get ahead of you, I'm sure, by saying the following, which is that we're also talking about something about consolidated arrangement that would markedly speed up the amount, or reduce the amount of time an officer is waiting for a judge or a justice in the middle of the night and tied up in a court proceeding when the officer can be back on the road. So I don't know where this fits in your list of things that we could change. It's actually not a law enforcement restructuring, it's more of a court restructuring that would impact the level of service we can provide for the same dollar.
You're right, and that restructuring, and I don't even refer to that in this report because law enforcement officers have little control over it. I do reference the fact that several of the agencies complain about how difficult it is for them to find a justice off hours, or even sometimes during hours, which is a problem in some of these communities. Excuse me. And in the baseline report, we go into response times by agency. In one case, we look at community, but it's very, very generalized. You have to understand response times. If you're going for a barking dog, it's different than a man with a weapon. And we try and break that down. We do analyze it by type of call. So we look at response time by type of call. So we are trying to compare apples to apples. But not every weapons-related incident is created equal either. So you have to look at it as kind of a global trend rather than a precise measurement. So our costs per FTE. This is in thousands. And right now, Cuba Heights has the most expensive police force in the county right now, at $158,000 per full-time officer. And this takes their salary and their benefits. It does not consider retirement obligation and post-retirement health care obligation. It does consider how much money is being contributed to their retirement in this year, but it doesn't consider what the post-retirement health care expenses could be, which is a different discussion than we're going to get into tonight. And this is benefits and salary. Now, I was asked to take a look at this as what would happen if the Ithaca Police Department settles their contract and gets retroactive raises for the last 6 years. And at a back of the envelope 2% a year, it's it's about a 13% increase. And if they had that for 2017, their costs would be about 173 per thousand. That's a substantial increase from where they are at about 158 or 154. So it goes up. This is a consideration that we wanted to look at in the report, because if we're talking about contracting for services between municipalities, you really needed to know what the cost for an Ithaca police officer might be after settlement. But we don't know when that's going to settle. We don't know what it's going to be. But this was I was given some ballpark numbers and told me to use them. All right. So what do we have for our first set of options? This is expanding some of the shared services that you're already doing. And, you know, and these are topics of conversation that came up in my different meetings, different interviews. One would be to expand the way they collaborate on training. Now, they already collaborate on training, but there is some opportunity. We thought that if they had a single training officer that was responsible for all the agencies in the county, or at least those who were willing to participate. You had a committee that was setting the curricula for the year, for the individual courses, handling some record keeping, and sharing that delivery of training, that you could do it a little bit better than you're doing it today. You already do it well, but this is a spot for improvement. Fleet maintenance, another thing that we can look at. There's record keeping, there's group purchasing. Everyone buys their vehicles off of state bid right now. You're not going to be able to lower that vehicle purchase cost very much. But if you could, right now there's part-time officers there are officers that are handling this as a part-time responsibility in all of the departments. Again, if you have a single person doing this, who might not even need to be a sworn officer, you might be able to improve that service and maybe lower the cost point of the person doing it. Criminal investigations, you have roughly a dozen full-time investigators working in the county between the Sheriff's Office and Ithaca Police. None of the other agencies have full-time investigators. They do have people who handle it on a part-time basis. If you were to take your full-time investigators and coordinate some of their specializations, they might be able to become better at, for instance, investigating cybercrime. Or you already have a fair amount of people who have the investigative experience in narcotics, but we could do some more white-collar crime. Those are the types of specializations that because they're generalists, they don't have the time to develop. So if you were able to say, okay, we're going to pick one of the Sheriff's Office investigators and he's going to learn this, and we're going to pick one of the IPD investigators and she's going to learn this, you might improve your investigations across the county. And expand that interdepartmental sharing. It's already pretty good, but I think there might be some opportunity of bringing it together. Unified policy and procedures, everybody has them, they're written down, they're pretty close, but again, if you had things that were a little bit more exact, when you go to, every time you revise a policy and procedure, it goes through a legal review. So if you're, instead of having to go through 5 legal reviews, one for each of the counties or each of the agencies, you go through one because you're adopting a single policy, you're going to save some expense there. So that's one opportunity for that. And you ensure that interoperability so that when you're approaching a high-risk event, you're making sure that everyone's approaching it the same way. This last one is, I think, a nugget that deserves some further exploration. And that's co-location and collaboration of some services between IPD and the Sheriff's Office. IPD is outgrown their current facility. It's in need of repair, so they're beginning to look at possible other locations. The Sheriff's Office is possibly considering moving their law enforcement operations out of the public safety jail facility into another facility. These are happening at the same time. If you could bring both of these operations under one roof, we're not combining the operations with this option, but we're bringing both operations under one roof, you have some opportunities for efficiency. Even things as simple as the front desk, they both have front desks. If you had a single front desk, you could have your staffing cross-trained. Still going to have the same number of employees there, but you might be able to create some efficiencies there. You'd be able to put all your, you talked about sharing the investigators. If they were all working in one hallway, they're going to be able to work together a little bit better. received from both IPD and the Sheriff's Office anecdotes about times that they were investigating a series of crimes, and so was the other department. They were chasing the same criminal because they don't care whether they're doing it in the city of Ithaca or the town of Ithaca. And if it's in the town, it's the Sheriff's Office, and if it's in the city, it's the city police.
On the other hand, if somebody attacks the local police, you end up with none.
I suppose you're right. And but I think, you know, with proper design, you can build a very resilient facility. So one of the options we want to talk about is contracting for services. So this is something where we have an intermunicipal agreement where one municipality hires another to provide a service for them, in this case law enforcement. And there's two different flavors of this: replacement for existing services. So an existing law enforcement agency is saying, you know what, we want to hire somebody else to do this service for us. And the other is providing a new service. Replacement for existing services, we've got a variety of potential partners that could be based on negotiation. You set up that contract based on effort and performance. So you do something along the lines of, we want to guarantee that we're going to have one officer primarily assigned to the community 24 hours a day. This is the type of response time we're expecting from you. This is how we expect you to interact with the village board. We're expecting that we're going to have a supervisor show up at our meetings, those kinds of things. And you set that out in an agreement. Now, when we look at the cost of FTEs in this community, because Dryden Police and Groton rely heavily on part-time officers to staff their roles, to staff their shifts, it doesn't make sense with today's costs for them to contract with either the sheriff or a neighboring agency, but primarily would be the sheriff's office. However, when we look at the price point for Cayuga Heights, they have the option where they might be able to save about 10% having the same number of officers if they contracted with the sheriff's office. And if they were able to provide the same level of service with fewer officers, we change that relationship a little bit more to make it more beneficial for the Cayuga Heights. When we talk about providing new services, town of Ithaca is growing, so is the town of Lansing. Either could hire Cayuga Heights, IPD might not make sense in Lansing, or the sheriff's office to provide dedicated patrolling to that town. Arrangement could be based on negotiation with performance criteria. It can be segmented to the town outside village budget. So those of you who are budget geeks, towns have a whole town budget and a town outside village budget. And you could segment this cost to the town outside village budget so the village isn't paying for it twice. And the costs